looks like to live in extreme poverty. You have to think about the basics like your next meal all the time. An extremely poor family mostly has access only to the food that they grow themselves. If you have a bad harvest, one of your animals gets sick, you're going to have a period where you're not getting enough food. Daughters in these families have to gather water and wood. They have to cook dinners on an open fire with lots of smoke, and then they have to clean everything up. If they get a chance to do schoolwork at all, it's going to be very late at night. They need a lamp, if they have it, to be able to do that work. So the upshot is, if you're extremely poor, your time and energy really goes to mere survival. Is poverty inevitable? The answer is no. We asked 2,000 people on what they thought was going on with poverty. We told them the 1990 number and asked them to guess where it had gone. And their guess was that it had fallen from that 36% down to 22%. In fact, the real line is far, far better. It drops all the way down to 9%. That means since 1990, 1.2 billion people have overcome extreme poverty. As the economist Max Roser has said, the newspapers could have run a headline, "Number of people in poverty fell by 137,000 since yesterday," every single day for 25 years, and been right. Real news. According to the World Bank, this extreme poverty definition we use is a cutoff of about $1.90 per day or less. Getting out of extreme poverty is not the end goal. We want people lifted up way beyond extreme poverty, but it's really the start that gets things going, that gets countries on the way to self-sufficiency and moving towards middle income. So this is not just about the individuals, it's also about the countries themselves. A single dot is representing 1 million people. Right now, you're seeing the number of dots that represent the number of people who overcame poverty since 1990. It's really great to see how we've made that incredible reduction, because it hints, okay, what remains, what do we have to do in the future? The progress came really in two great ways. The first wave was China. In 1990, 66% of people in China were extremely poor. So you can see all the dots there, each representing, again, 1 million people. But over just a short period, 15 years, their extreme poverty declined by over 500 million. The improvement in people's lives there is one of the most astonishing examples of progress in world history. The second wave came in India. Progress there started later, and it's been more gradual, but it's also an impressive trend. India went from 400 million people in extreme poverty in 2005 to just under 100 million today. And over the next several decades, that number is going to drop quite a bit. So the question we face here is, can we create a third great wave of poverty reduction in the rest of the world that will bring extreme poverty near to eradication? It's not going to be easy. We can go back to our dots, again looking at each one representing 1 million people, but now we're going to look at the people who remain in extreme poverty. So starting back in 1990, we're going to take all those dots and do a pie chart that gives us a sense of what it looked like by region back in 1990. So you can see sub-Saharan Africa, the blue part there, represented a relatively small slice of extreme poverty in 1990. But because this has fallen so quickly in East and South Asia, so we're dropping the total number of people a lot. But also, as we drop those numbers, you can see that that sub-Saharan slice, the blue slice, is getting to be a very substantial part of this pie. In fact, if we project this out to 2050, it's rather stunning. It's a trend that I sort of was aware of, but even I was surprised when we ran these numbers that it shows that almost 90% of the people remaining in extreme poverty will be in sub-Saharan Africa by 2050. If we zoom in even more and take it at the country level, we can see that there's quite variability in the progress here. We see that a few countries represent a lot of what remains, about a dozen here. In fact, if you just take the two countries with the most people, which would be the Democratic Republic of Congo and Nigeria, that alone will be 40% of the entire world's population in extreme poverty. And if we zoom even further in and look at a map of Nigeria and say, okay, where inside Nigeria will we have this? Based on 2013 data, we can see that it's not spread evenly. As you move towards the north, there's far more poverty than in the south. And so this gap that you're seeing there grows quite a bit over time. What this means is that this poverty is going to be a feature of life in a few places. And these are places where there are the fewest opportunities. Often, some of these places, there's violence, a lack of stability. These are places where climate change will make these subsistence farmers' lives more difficult. Also, these are often places where the governance is not providing the primary health care or education, even at a basic level. And every one of these places are exactly where we're experiencing rapid population growth. The geography of births in the world is changing, and this is something that's really fascinating. Over the rest of the century, the number of babies born stays about the same. We've really reached peak baby. But if we look at this chart, we can see that the places that they're born are changing. We've split it into a blue line, which is babies born in sub-Saharan Africa every year, and the white line, which is the entire rest of the world. And you can see you go from today, where by the end of the century, it's almost getting up to the point where half of the babies on the planet are born, not just in sub-Saharan Africa, but overwhelmingly in the poorest parts of sub-Saharan Africa. So the 10 countries projected to be the poorest in the world in 2050 currently are only 10% of the world's births. By 2050, they're 20%, and by 2100, using these UNFPA numbers, it could get up to 40%. So in short, babies are going to be born in what are currently the toughest circumstances in the most challenging places in the world. They'll be born in situations where they'll at least start out spending all their time as a family, as an individual, just seeking out the food that they need and not have as much time to invest in their education, invest in building assets. So we really need to address this. We need to double down on key investments in these very tough places. The first two waves are also instructive in terms of what these investments should look like. Let's start with the investments in the people, primarily in their health and education. China set a great example here. In 1990, 1 in 3 Chinese children were chronically malnourished, which means that not only physically, but also mentally, they never fully developed. They did not achieve their potential. And the typical Chinese youth never got into high school. Well, since then, China has solved that malnutrition problem. And in education now, almost all students not only graduate from high school, a very high percentage, almost half, attend college. You just look at those cities in China and you see, wow, something miraculous came out of those human capital investments. And so to create this third wave of poverty reduction, sub-Saharan Africa's young need the same level of investment in their human capital. Of course, the size of that investment is going to be very large because of this population growth, the doubling in their youth population by 2050. In sub-Saharan Africa, for these youthful generation, we need to get a lot of resources there and help those countries build these systems. Our partner, the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, did these poverty projections on the continent, considering a couple of scenarios where the key thing we varied was the investment level in human capital. And so the status quo shows that the absolute number of people in extreme poverty will go up by about 50 million by 2050. That's disappointing. Even more sobering, though, is if we look at what some donors have talked about doing in terms of disengaging, we look at governments not continuing to improve, there you get a very dire situation where the number almost doubles, gets up to 672 million. But we also took a scenario, the one we believe in, the one we all want to rally around, where we increase that human capital investment, where we improve those health systems and those primary and secondary schools. And there, we're able to drive that extreme poverty down by over 90 million from where we stand today. So the gap between the bad scenario and the good scenario is over a factor of 2, almost 400 million people. So that's really what's at stake. For the right innovation, which is the most powerful force in the world, I really believe it's possible we might be able to do even better than that. You know, a great example of this was what a discussion like this would have been about India back in the 1960s. The yield for wheat, which was very, very meager, was changed by modern technologies and techniques. And now we're at almost 4 times the productivity. That's another innovation we need to bring to Africa. But innovation can appear in many, many different sectors. And so we need some great innovations. Soil maps, how we can pick the right fertilizer, digital technology to help us understand what's going on with malnutrition and help solve that, education and how by getting reading resources out there to kids, their natural curiosity will let them help develop the key skills. And so it's by investing in this innovation and backing young innovators across sub-Saharan Africa, we can get a very positive scenario. But I do remember what it was like to be rebellious and have new ideas. I waited until my parents were asleep and I snuck out of the house in the middle of the night to go up and use a computer in the University of Washington's physics department. There were a few hours in the middle of the night when the graduate students weren't there and I could have a few hours on this big, amazing machine. I would do anything to get my hands on it and try out to see what the magic of software could do. And that's the kind of rebelliousness or new thinking that I'm hoping we can tap into today. The natural desire of youth to change things and make the world better. The world we want, a world in which every person can dream of a better future and make it come true, is a world without extreme poverty. Thank you.
I think essentially 2 things are instructive from that video. First of all, he lays continuous emphasis on not just sub-Saharan Africa, but Nigeria. And then he talks specifically about northern Nigeria. And he talks about the world where there is no extreme poverty. But when you narrow that down to Nigeria, and given the reality that we deal with as a population, is that really possible? A huge number of people live with not just poverty, extreme poverty in this country. What is the chance, if at all, that these persons can be pulled out of that state of poverty? I have 3 gentlemen with me on the program this morning. I'll begin from my immediate left. Destiny Owobu is a statistician. Thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you.
And next to him is the respected professor from the University of Benin. He's the chairman, ASU Uniben chapter, Professor Julius Iyasele. Appreciate your presence. Thank you for coming. And we also have an economic expert, Uigwe Fred, is with us on the program as well this morning. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
We appreciate it. So let's put this discussion on the road as quickly as possible. I'll begin with you, Destiny. Walk us through what exactly it is that we're not doing right in West Africa, in Sub-Saharan Africa generally. Now, they talk about the global south.
Yeah.
That is not an appealing, as it were, appellation.
Yes.
Exactly, when you talk about the global south, where Nigeria incidentally and sadly belongs.
Yes.
And then you're not talking about countries like the Asian tigers, who appear, or who I should say, obviously, are more forward-thinking.
Yeah.
What exactly is the link that's broken right now?
I think in all these growths, development stories, fast increasing rates of development.
Yes.
Human capital development is the major indices deciding whether a society will become poor over time or rich over time. The Asian miracle, all of them are attributed to massive investment in education, especially technical and engineering education. You cannot get out of poverty without producing. So the Asian miracle, so to speak, the miracle, the big miracle was education. Massive education and investment in critical infrastructure that raises the country out of poverty. And that is where the difference between the big rich and the sub-Saharan countries in Africa stand. Africa has not invested much of its resources in its future. It tends to invest more on its past. How do I mean? The future has a lot of opportunities in technology, internet technology, in chemicals, in artificial intelligence, things like that. But Africa seems to be trying to solve the problems of today, only to grow up and meet up tomorrow. Now, what China did was to have a 30-year plan, looking at the future, 2000, from 1970 to 2000. They sent thousands of Chinese to these developed countries to go and school and learn technology. And while they also put some basic infrastructures in place to ensure that this country works according to plan. I think the problem is Africa has not been able to translate most of its vision to practical, workable solutions. And these are issues we need to deal with for a very long time until our government sits and begin to look at them. So poverty is, like Bill Gates said, it's something that can be solved. India was a poor country 50 years ago. China was a poor country 50 years ago. Most of the world was poor. Only 15% of the world was rich as of 1950. Now, China, a powerhouse, 1.6 billion people, we're able to get out of poverty. And it's estimated that in the next 50 years, China may overtake the US and the developed world at the rate at which they are going. India, another very poor country in the 60s, has less poor people than Nigeria, for instance, now. Just about 60 million. 1.2 billion people. Over 800 million people were moved out of poverty in 40 years. So it's possible. And now it's even easier. The reason why it was possible because of the effect of globalization. It was difficult to do that 200 years ago. But with information technology, with massive flow of information around the world, innovation and enterprise, it is easier to get a country out of poverty now in a very short time. So it's no longer miraculous, it's no longer an Asian miracle, it can be an African miracle, it can be any miracle. But you need to get the basics right. And what has Africa not gotten right, sub-Saharan Africa especially? Education, not just education, go to school. We mean hardcore, developmentally oriented education. It's not reading and writing. Education is not literacy. Expert knowledge to drive people out of poverty. For example, America does not teach people how to make machines too much. There is a service-based economy. Doctors, lawyers, pilots, engineers, these are experts. You do not need to have a big factory to be rich these days. All you need to do is to have human capital. So Nigeria can take advantage of that, for instance. Sub-Saharan Africa can take advantage of that by training experts. And that requires heavy investment in education. When I mean education, like I said again, hardcore education.
At this point, you're leaving me no option to bring in Professor right now, because he has seen the inside of education in this country. So he has a very strong handle on this matter.
All right.
He just talked about education, for example. We are still dealing with literacy, essentially. I mean, how to read, write, speak basic everyday English that everybody understands.
Yeah.
But he's talking about specialized, focused kind of education now.
Yeah.
The word is now emphasizing STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics.
Yes.
How do we begin to make sense of this whole thing and begin to cut down on poverty in Nigeria?
I'm very happy that I wasn't the one that brought the issue of education into this discourse. Because as it were, at the end of the day, it's okay, I start ASU, they have come and all that. But the issue is that we have said before, that we need to come to an understanding. There is no two-way about it other than investment into education or designing a program to lift the people out of poverty by way of education. We came at a point in this country where we designed an educational system of a 6-3-3-4, and the government then went around purchasing all manners of technological equipment for the secondary and primary schools and all that. But go to those schools now, these equipment are now vandalized.
Was that a step in the right direction at the time?
Beautiful, yes. Now, of course, it's not everybody that is a university material. If you go to some other advanced client, what you have is that a child is monitored to be able to tap the best that has been bequeathed in him or her by God. That is the way a country runs. You don't just leave a people to wander and stumble and fumble. It is not like that. You must follow. But in this country, you know, a government will come into place, design programs, another one comes, and of course, out of envy and then wanting to say we're not laying back on the, you know, their own programs, design theirs, and leave what would have, as it were, would have been the best for this country. So that is where we are. The issue is that government must come back, but that is a government that is sincere. I've talked about it before. My thinking, what I have observed over the years in this country is insincerity of government. Are we really ready to start? Because we are not kick-started. If what everybody is struggling now is how to retain power and have to undo the order and all that. If you, one time I went into a friend's office and he had just won as local government chairman, and it was about 6 months after victory, and they were still talking about how they won the election, and that was all that was being discussed. And I looked at it and said, what are these people doing here? I called my friend and said, are you sure you will succeed on this? He said, forget that and all that. But at the end of the day, revenue will come from the center, they will share, and that is the success.
Let me ask you one more thing before I come to Igwe.
Yeah.
As it stands right now, we're told we have at least 10.5 million out-of-school children in this country. Some people have said that is a time bomb waiting to explode.
Why not?
Isn't there a correlation between that reality and the level of poverty we've come to see in Nigeria
Let
today?
me tell you, Dangote was speaking a few days ago
in Kaduna.
In Kaduna,
yes.
and said the northwest, south, I mean the northeast. Of course, the population
in those states.
The population of the state is about 54%. That the northern population is about 54% of the total Nigerian population, and they have a landmass of about 77%. And of all of these, what they are able to generate is just a little 21% of the total Nigerian whatever.
And that's abysmal.
Can you imagine that? And it is in this same area. He was now, you know, upbraiding all the governors in the north that they must come up. But I felt bad when he now said the Kaduna State governor was doing well. And I don't know how you are going to be able to do well in an insecure environment. So, totally.
But it depends on the KPIs he was looking at.
What was he looking at? Is there any way you are going to do anything? Is there any way the economy was going to succeed where they are maiming and killing every day?
But Kaduna State has been ranked I think the first.
It's the worst out of the best
in terms of ease of doing business.
The best out of the worst. That is what the ranking that we are seeing there. I'm just listen to what I said. I say is the worst out of the best out of the worst. That is what you are saying about Kaduna, because Kaduna is metropolitan. Remember, it used to be the capital of Nigeria. So that is why what they are suffering in. It's not as if anything new thing has happened. Any day you are killing.
Prof, I'm going to need your help on a few more issues as we continue this discussion. But let me come to Fred now. He just talked about the Kaduna issue where Nigeria's businessman, Africa's richest, was talking about how that the governors in the north essentially will have to rise up to the occasion and be able to pull their people out of poverty. He talked about how that they have vast arable land, yet they produce what he believes is not commensurate with the resources that they've been blessed with. Is it enough to task the governors? I mean, can the governors do enough to pull the people in that region of the country out of poverty?
That's a very good question. In building up investment, in developing investment, you have to go back to the fundamentals, the factors that help build up investments. The ones the governments have the opportunity to engender will be one, the laws. What kind of laws do you have? Do the laws innovate development, productivity? The policies. When you leave the policies, you now go down to the programs. After the programs, you go down to the projects, specific projects. And then you come down to infrastructure, actual application of all of this. Talk about infrastructural development, because before you come to facilities and amenities. In all of this, the gentlemen have talked about educating our people. Fortunately, for those of us who lived through the early years of the military back in the 60s into the 70s, until they handed over to the second civilian administration, the Shagari administration, we saw in this very climb a system that worked. This place, I mean, we had companies growing on a daily basis. We had a government that was proactive. We had 5 and 10-year program, development programs in place. Nigeria at the time, I remember very well, in 1975, Nigeria was ranked among 8 of the countries that were soon to be developed, along with Argentina, Mexico, Brazil, South Korea, Thailand, and India. China was not even in the radar at the time. Malaysia was not in the radar at the time. Nigeria was doing better than those countries. But what happened 5, 10 years down the road? South Korea went on to break into that class of the newly emerging economies. Mexico did, Brazil, you know, in that order. But the only 2 countries that failed were India and Nigeria. But India is even now doing much better than Nigeria is. Nigeria is not even ranked among them anymore. Why? Because policies were bastardized. Policies were changed. There was no continuity. Like Americans say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The government at the time was very instrumental in developing new opportunities, new facilities. I mean, investment facilities, investment jobs. Like in Benden State of the time, if you do your research, over 70 companies were established by the instrument of government at the time. Then we started talking about a policy because somebody made a statement that government has no business in business.
Is that correct?
It is not, that is not correct. It is not, I mean, you cannot just take that statement and run with it and say that is it. There has to be elements to make that statement correct. And we didn't have those. Because there have to be specific laws. You have to be, for example, you have to be able to have an environment where competition, free, fair and equitable competition is in place. That is what motivates people. If I know I'm going to enjoy an advantage by patronage, by specific or special patronage, why then do I need to put the effort in competitive endeavors? I will not. In a country like the United States, they have two laws that engender competition. One, no price fixing. You cannot come together and collude to fix prices. No. It's punishable by up to 14 plus years imprisonment. And also, another one, monopolies. You cannot have monopolies. Here, I heard recently...
Even as a capitalist country?
Yes, you cannot have monopolies, because when you have monopolies, what happens? The monopoly sets its price. He holds everybody to ransom. That is what we are suffering now, for example, with our electricity in this climate here. We have a monopoly. And so we cannot challenge it. We are all held hostage. And we cannot receive service. because the monopolist enjoys surplus profit. If you have monopolies, they dictate what you want to do, just to their advantage. So those are some of the laws first you have to have. Then now come to the issue of the police. We have cried about corruption so much. Who polices the police? If the police would do their job, then people would not feel so
insecure.
How do I put this? They will not feel so free to commit crimes. There will not be that level of impunity that we see today. There's a whole lot of impunity. People do things like I was coming here this morning. Somebody is driving opposite the traffic this morning, holding up a whole lot of people. The police is not doing what they should be doing. We should think about our own moral
obligation,
our own moral suasion as a people. In a church I attended, I was back in the United States, but it was a Nigerian church, a small church of a mega assembly with several branches. As soon as a new pastor came in, I was a member of the leadership group and all of that. And somebody began to talk about pastor's appreciation. And then I know that we're collecting pittance. A lot of people had come, $1, 50 cents, $2 as offering. And then you set a table and you want to feast the leadership. The conscience is not there. How are you going to feast? How are you going to? I had my meal that I was going to have at home that day after church. But here you want to use the money that this people just gave to feed the leaders of the church. It happens. I only use that as an example, but it happens everywhere. There is no moral standard to guide us to be disciplined. We need to be individually disciplined and to be collectively disciplined. Let me end with this for example. Early in the years of this nation's birth, from years of independence and all of that, we were very modest as a people. There were marriages and burials that were modest. But today, everybody wants to marry as a king. Everybody wants to bury his loved ones as a king. So what does that do to us? We waste resources. Resources that could have been channeled to productive purposes. They have talked about education. We did not have education a long time ago. But over the years, schools have sprung up. Private schools. There was a time when only government schools existed. There were no private schools. And then people began to establish private schools. Now you have by far many more private schools than you have government schools. Everywhere. Educating the children and all of that. We have educated people. But what do? After the little education they had, is there a program to begin to apply that resource to productive uses? No. We have our people who left here because they felt that this system was going to engage them, engage their intellect. So they left, went abroad. You see many of them coming back today and making investments, sacrificial investments, I call it. Look at your immediate environment. What do we have? Hotels and schools. Those ones that will not necessarily build us up. So
you mean they don't drive the economy?
They will not drive the economy. So we need to have a revisit. I thank God that yes, we have a statistician here, but we need to have a robust statistical industry department that will conduct surveys on a gamut of.
But we have the National Bureau of Statistics.
Yes, but they do not do enough. We You know, now you and I, if we have a question, we jump to Google, okay? And we find out what the answer is. Why? People have taken the pains to conduct surveys and analyze these surveys for their systems. We can find much more information about what happens abroad than we can find at home.
Sure.
And the reason is we have not conducted enough. We are not proactive. We are not aggressive about conducting.
I think Prof is actually to add to what you just said.
Let me bring you back to your question.
Right.
About whether the northern governors
can do enough.
Enough of that.
So alleviate poverty.
Yes, you see, that brings a fact. What Dangote said in Kaduna simply shows a simple system that we are just sweeping under the table.
And that's
the regionalization issue.
Okay.
You see, in this country earlier, things worked. Of course, Obafemi Awolowo as premier of the Western region. If you go there, you see, you have now 4 or 5 generations of graduates, or 9 generations of graduates, you know, because he saw education as the light to the people. And of course, then if you go to the West, you see then Odutola tires, you see Teju this, Teju that, and today they are still holding sway, you know, in the industry. It's only now, maybe the Southeast appears now to be catching up with them. But you see, the regeneration thing created this competition in the country. And now, nobody is competing with anybody. Everybody goes to Abuja to collect, you know, money and returns back to the state without thinking and all that. So what we are saying here, like he spoke, he knows that the northerners, the northern governors, can come and then do some thinking, looking at what they have in their environment, the landmass and the type of climate they have there, and develop that region. If our country, if we can be sincere and now return back to the regional administration, I'm sure that we are going to do better than the current system that we have here. And then when somebody says that government have no
business in business,
we have completely missed it out. There are 3 simple ideological stance you can have. You have the socialists, you have the welfarists or communists, and then you have the extreme capitalism. And all of us now, we are practicing mixed all of them, but mostly to the extreme capitalism.
So this is essentially a hybrid system.
Yes, and that is where you don't have a government, everything is in the private hands. Who sets the standard? Who provides the enabling environment? If you say government have no business in business. And so we must return back to all of this. And first of all, on the draw table, for those, if we are really ready to now start, come back to the draw table. We've practiced a system for how many years now? Look at all the types we have practiced, you know, since Nigeria gained independence. And then look which will be better for us. We all sit down. And I thought this was one of the essence of the Constitutional Conference that was conducted under Goodluck Ebele Jonathan's presidency.
That was in 2014.
In 2014.
Right.
I thought. But now that has been swept under the carpet for primordial political reasons.
Now that you've mentioned
looking at the import of all of that.
Now that you've mentioned 2014, let's quickly take a look at a clip where the former former Minister for Finance, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, also made an allusion to what is happening concerning extreme poverty. She talks about India and then tries to draw comparison between India and Nigeria. Let's take a listen.
India is a middle-income country, one of the largest in the world, like Nigeria is a big economy. But the largest number of poor people in the world reside in India and China and other places. Most middle-income countries, even Brazil, have large numbers of poor people. That is the reality of today. Nigeria is no exception. And when the World Bank president is talking, he also talked about those countries. He mentioned that India is doing well. It has a large number of poor people. China, today, if you go to the Chinese, they will tell you that, no, let us slow down about praising China, because we still have a substantial number of poor people. Brazil, the same. That is why they started the social safety net program in Brazil. So we should not try to single Nigeria out. The phenomenon we have in Nigeria, whereby we are growing, but there are poor people, is everywhere. What we have to do is focus on what is the answer. What are other countries doing that we can also learn from and do? Nobody says that everything is fine, but we are learning. And where we make some progress like other countries, we should also acknowledge it. People know, I've been to India myself, one of those countries, and I can tell you that the situation of some poor people there, if you compare it to Nigeria, I'll be happy to be a Nigerian.
I mean, gentlemen, you listened, and she just talked about how that when you look at India and look at Nigeria, that she would be happier to be a Nigerian. Does that kind of statement make us complacent and laid back?
She talked as a government person. That is all.
Let's allow Destiny quickly respond to that.
With due respect to the Honorable Former Minister, you see, that is a fatalistic approach. You don't explain poverty of your country in relation to it is happening elsewhere. Politicians speak that way. When there's a bomb in your place, you say bombs exist everywhere. It's a weak approach at development. What we want to find out is this: what is the structure of that poverty? When you are comparing countries, you must look at the differences in their structure, in their culture, in their demographics and other. You don't just look at the figures, poverty figures. What is poverty? Poverty is inability to have a basic quality life. Inability to have a basic quality life. Now in India, she's talking about. Indians are one of the most educated people in the world, even when they were poor. If you go to the US, the biggest software giants are Indians. If you go to developed countries, Indians are high-tech. The system is their problem. But here, we do not have high-tech people. So there are two different things you should not consider. If you go to America, as I speak to you right now, you're going to see Indians. They work in the Ivy League universities. They work in the big Fortune 500 companies. When they come, you see software giants, you see small Indians. They are poor in their country, but when they get to America, they're experts. They are one of the most educated experts in the US.
Yes.
So we must check what we are comparing. When we talk about development, it's a total concept. First of all, there are three things that need to support development, which is seriously lacking in Nigeria. The first thing, the biggest drive to development from all economic sources I've studied, is a system that works.
Okay. Why? And some say ours doesn't work.
Yes, a system. You see, now the world has gone beyond strongman economies. What we have is system-based economies. What's a regular system? Like the minister said, you must have enabling laws that are that cut across all spheres, that allows people to understand what they should do and what they should not do. Two, you must protect property rights. A situation where people buy properties or they go into business and they're not sure that they're going to make returns, the laws should be fair. Three, you must have an efficient security system. This system must work. I was lucky enough to attend 2 universities. I'll tell you what a system is. When I was in the University of Benin, for instance, with all due respect to the school, we want to take a bus, then we rush to the bus, and then we take it when I was a student. And then I was used to that.
I hope you're saying that, bearing in mind that Professor Julius.
Yes. No. I'm not. We should rush take the bus, and we struggle. If you are lucky, you get to the bus on time. And then I happened to go to University of Lagos, in the same country. And then the first day I got there, I saw people queuing to enter a bus. And I said, what's this? I'm not used to that. So I queued. And then it came to exam. I thought I was still in Uniben. So I got late. I got to the place about 5 minutes late. And I went there and I told somebody there, please, I forgot that everybody's writing exam. They're on queue. And I told the person, please, let me take your position. And the person said, I'm writing the exam too. I forgot. He said, school. Stay there. And I said, what? I looked at it. I wasted 15 minutes on queue. I spent 4 years in University of Lagos, and I saw that it is a standard system. In my final year, I saw a lecturer coming, and the lecturer stood on the same queue, the same country. And then it worked. It was very simple. Even animals, when you set up a good system, animals function properly. Train an animal to move a certain way and give them the operating rules. Stick by the rules. An animal, a goat, will function in a healthy manner. Now, if you set up a system The system must be sustainable. It must work. Human beings will be human beings, but the system must work. So we have not been able to set up a system, number one. Number two, the ethics of the people, what we call the psychological basis of their reasoning, also affects development. For instance, in Asia, the average Asians, they are not Christians, they are atheists. They believe in Buddhism. And Buddhism emphasizes personal success, personal discovery. And so the average Asian sees a problem. The way he interprets the world is this problem is mine to solve. They have what we call internal locus of control. That means their interpretation of reality is internally driven. But in Africa, in Nigeria for instance, we have what we call the external locus of control. When you ask in Nigeria, why does he succeed? Now God. Why does he fail? Now devil. We look at the world from two dimensions. And those two dimensions are God, devil, God, devil. And so when our systems fail, we say God will solve it. When our systems succeed, we say God will do it right. We do not have a personal thinking of development is personal. It's something you have to interpret and act out. The average Nigerian's approach to solving a problem is theological. They are not pragmatic like Americans. The Americans are they are Pentecostals, but the American God is an economist. Make money, build empires, build systems. They see their solution. You see the way they talk. When you ask Americans, why did you do this? I did this because I needed to make this. They see the world from the result of their actions. The average Nigerian is mystical. If you go to Ring Road, go to everywhere in Nigeria now, you see the way we think. The billboards in developed countries carry companies. Okay? It shows that they are in an industrial economy. They believe in development, production, output, employment. But look at our billboards. You see the difference. Religious institutions everywhere. It shows that Nigerians are religious. And there's a statistic that shows that the more religious a country is, the more poor it is. There are many economic statistics to demonstrate that. It's not a mean to serve God, it's a bad thing. But religiosity is believing that there's an external force that drives human affairs. You have little to do. Just allow the system to go. It explains why when somebody wins an election in Nigeria, anyhow, we know it is the man is not supposed to win. We say, don't worry, let's let 4 years pass. Let's 4 years pass, we put another one there. You know, Nigerians have this like a desert attitude to everything. But in America, if you rig elections, Americans can debate an issue for 5 years until the thing changes.
And somebody might end up in jail.
Yes, they don't care. If you try to cheat the Americans, they will go on the street, you see 4 million Americans protesting. They don't believe in let time pass, let things go away. Things will never go away. Look at the issue of Brexit, for instance, in England. That issue has been on for 3 years. It is debated every day. The white man is tenacious. They will fight until they solve that problem. But we will just, something will make a headline. In 2 weeks, it is off headline in Nigeria. We go back to our life. You know, life goes on. So that's the second thing, the will of the people. The Asians have a solid work ethic that even Americans envy. In the last World Cup, Japan was given an award for their ethic. After every match, Japan will clean the stadium. They were not the ones hosting. They clean the stadium, they will package it. The Japanese, their work ethic is, they have a 100% mentality. Okay? FIFA had to give them World Cup. When they lost in the World Cup, they were going, the way they packaged the hotel they stayed. They arranged it, arranged the beds. When FIFA staff came to inspect, they were so clean. FIFA called Japan, gave them an award. These are not religious people. They are just, it's ethics. So if you apply the same ethics to business, you're going to succeed. If you apply to run your economy, you're going to succeed. Their roads are clean. If there's an earthquake in Japan, in 24 hours, they fix the road. The average Japanese is an ant. He works, they are very, very active as human beings. They are not idle. The third issue of development that must exist is there must be security. In a place where there's insecurity like Syria, where do you expect development to come from? Where people are running away. As I speak to you, 4,000 doctors leave this year every year. Leave this country every year. To develop countries to go and earn income. Where are they living? We don't need to be told that there's a problem. 4,000 trained doctors. That's a big brain drain. In fact, I have an uncle in Canada. You know what he told me? I talked to him. He told me that I am too intelligent to be in the worst corner of earth. He's in Nigeria. I am too. That's what he told me. That's my uncle. That I am too intelligent. As dull as I think I am. I'm too intelligent. He said the average Nigerian is primordial. He was born in this country. He's not very lazy. We used to call him lazy uncle. But he got to Canada. He worked in a system that is advanced. He earns roughly $180,000 a year. He's just, what does he do? If I tell you what he does, you will laugh. He's a psychologist. He works in a clinic. Because the system is working. System. So you must get system right. You must get the attitudes of people right. The way they think, what they value. You must, those are psychological.
Incidentally, everybody here has mentioned education, particularly yourself and Professor. Let me come back to Prof. They say at least half of the graduates we churn out from our institutions, tertiary institutions every year, are not only unemployed, worse still, they are not employable. Yes, I mean, that is mind-boggling, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you can't have the conversation about poverty and not make reference to such a disturbing development.
Yeah. Who are we going to blame?
We don't want to blame the devil for that, do we?
Exactly. We won't be talking about the devil here. But the truth about it is what I've talked about. The design of an educational system. You know, I talked about it since 334 system. And then you now come to, even within the system, the kind of curriculum that is designed for the students. He has mentioned it. That is purely theoretical. That is it. It's hands-on now. It's not what can your hands do. Your brain will conceptualize and then your hands will practicalize it. That is the way to go. And so until we now sit back and then now, okay, let's begin to discuss differently. Yesterday, I called to another professor. About 4 of us have been picked to teach a particular course, industrial chemistry, for instance, to final year students. And I said, we have to hold a meeting. We don't need to depend on the prospectus, the provisions in the prospectus, because it's even neither here nor there. You are talking about the current trends in chemistry. So we need to sit down now and then say, this is trending. These are the areas for this session that we must tackle so that the students will benefit at the end of the day. That is the way we are supposed to. But you find that our curriculum is Elizabethan. See, the old thing, is that what is going, is that what is what you have in the world now? So how can then the students now cope? Do you understand? So we must change, we must educate the people, and the type of education is not the reading and writing that we are talking about. We are talking about hands-on ability to develop things yourself. People are going, and then we are forgotten in this country that, you know, we are before the globe. It is now everybody, no more, it's okay, yes, yeah, in Nigeria, no, you are competing, every child here is competing globally. That is where we are now. And then technology moves things, and we are still very much behind and looking at, you know, theoretical presentations that the Aristotles, Albert Einstein had put across earlier. People are talking about John Law and all that. Then, the application of those theories, that is where the world now is. And that is why people now want to use the principle of Archimedes' principle to now, you know, have submarines and all that, go to the moon. You should be applying principles of theories that have been laid in the past, whether it works or not. That is where we are now. So,
but again, that's one thing that raises concern, the issue of our curriculum.
Yes.
There has been this back and forth about how that we urgently need to tweak, or as some say, rejig our curriculum.
Exactly.
But that's not rocket science, is it? Why is it so difficult to accomplish?
It's not rocket science, but you have a government that is not even aware. That is the truth. Because who are the proprietors of the universities or the schools? Who creates the standards? Is it not government? So it has to do with government. Also developing committees of persons that will sit back and now say, okay, or sit down and now say, okay, we need to design another curriculum for the schools, for the universities, and all that. How can you, you know, they brought the idea that at the secondary school level, a child needs to be able to open a computer and fix it. You need to be able to use computer to design programs. You need to be able to do carpentry. A child needs to do masonry. You know, do so many. I hope you know that you can find some of our electricians and they don't know that if a naked wire touches water, it will, and then they touch the water, it will shock them also. Yes.
We still have electricians like that.
Very, very well, yes. And we have said this here even before, that we should now design a program for even all the mechanics in this town to come learn rudimentary automobile. You have to go through that, otherwise at the end of the day, very soon, then somebody told me the latest of a Mercedes-Benz is that as we approach it, because you have programmed your image, the car's open to you without using the key to open it. So it recognizes your image or maybe your voice, and that is where you enter into the car. So how is our people here going to know how to repair that, other than destroying the car because of trial and error?
Do we need to pray for our people to also know how to fix that? But let me allow you to catch your breath now, Prof. I was just kidding about that one. But quite frankly now, Igwe, economists will always argue that the more vibrant or robust an economy is, the brighter the chances of such an economy to cut down poverty. Incidentally, in Nigeria, we have hundreds of thousands of small businesses scattered across the country. Most of them are really challenged. The Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, has made allusion to that fact every opportunity he gets. How do we begin to strengthen small businesses? Because they are the engine room of the economy.
Establishing small businesses, establishing businesses at a low level, it's okay for survival.
Right.
And that is basically what we are doing as an economy. Okay? These are all survival endeavors that we are engaging in. But a person or a system needs to operate at an efficient level.
Right.
Okay? And it is in operating at an efficient level that you get the best and the most out of the person or out of the system. I will quickly want to respond to something that our statistician told us about externalizing our challenges as opposed to internalizing our challenges. It is called self-challenge or taking responsibility, which we do not do. We need to begin to self-challenge ourselves. Look at the challenges in our environment and have a system by which we solve them. We should have systems, community systems, family systems, community systems. In the United States, for example, you have homeowners association in every subdivision. So should there be a problem within the community, they come together and they discuss it and they solve it for the community. And if it works for them, it becomes a model for other communities.
To replicate.
To replicate.
Right.
So we need to have this kind of little organizations. Talking about the small companies, the small establishments, small businesses, small entrepreneurs, however you want to call it, they need to be encouraged. The way you encourage them is to give them low interest loans, because there are three major things, four, if you are in Nigeria, that are accountable for business failures. One, bad idea. If the idea is wrong, like selling a pair of shoes, which is the typical example they give to us back in school, one that is a size 8 and another that is size 9, you're not going to find a lot of customers with two different sizes of feet, right? So that would be a bad idea right off the bat, okay? Bad ideas, bad management, insufficient funds, finance. So first, you have to have also an organization that helps counsel these people. You see, there's something going on in the United States. There are a lot of free seminars that people attend. They are free. They lure you in, you come in, you go, you spend 2-3 hours, you learn a lot. Business seminars. People go to seminars on a daily. If you are in between jobs, you go to seminars. You learn something new. You get information. You ask questions. Then if you are going to establish a business, you identify a seminar that speaks to your new desire and you go. If it's a science challenge you have, or ambition or aspiration you have, you go through the available seminars, a list of available seminars coming up, and you attend one. So it brings us back to education. We cried for a long time about education. Now, like I said earlier, we are sufficiently educated to take this system to the next level and even higher than the next level. We have people at home who can do it. Much more, we have people abroad that are willing to come home, but are not encouraged to come and make that contribution. I schooled in the United States. I paid 90% of my school fees. I wrote home specifically for my parents to stop sending me school fees. I did that because the system allowed me to do that. When we were growing up here, back up to the mid-70s, and even up to late 70s, students at the time could take up vacation jobs. I mean university students. They could take up vacation jobs. And when they did that, two things. They were able to free their parents from the burden of supporting them during vacation and even during school. Okay, supporting them with stipends and allowances and all of that. That is what you find in the United States. At the age of 14, 15, 16, the students, secondary school students, now I'm talking about, they get employed into part-time jobs, doing 16 to 24 hours a week, maximum. They said maximum they can do. They don't want them to begin to take full-time jobs so that they are not distracted. So that gives them two things: discipline, work ethics. So they already know. So by the time they graduate, which is what we were talking about here, rejigging our educational system, rejigging our curriculum and all of that. No, it doesn't end there. The reason they do better than us is because while they are yet in school, they are already employed. They already have developed work ethics. They already know that when you are late for your job, you get fired. Or when you come unprepared or drunk or anything, you are fired. I learned that. I was in the hospital for a surgery, cyst surgery back in the US, and my surgeon asked me, do you drink? I said, yes, I drink. I said, how much do you drink? I said, a couple of cans of beer a week. He said, no, that's not what I'm talking about. Because that is what the system allowed me to do. Recreational drinking. If I was going to go to school, I could not go there drunk. If I was going to go to work, I could not go there drunk. So there was no time to drink, to engage in frivolities. These are some of the things we have to give our people the opportunity. We have to look at our system. We have to review our entire system and see how we can begin to make amends, how we can begin to be disciplined. You see, we engage in a lot of bringing matter of ethics and morals into it. We engage in, especially managers of our organizations, engage in a lot of conflict of interests. Okay? You have to have laws and policies to forbid such, where people can take advantage of an organization that employs and pays them for their own personal advantage. You have to be able to stop all that. There has to be discipline. There has to be structure, so that everybody is. If I, as the manager of a company, I advantage myself with funds from the company, maybe just a car or the value of a car, I am not only disadvantaging the company like we see it here, I'm doing it to every employee there, because they have all contributed to the development of that company up to that stage, and I have now advantaged myself. with something that belongs to the entire organization. So we have to have laws, we have to have policies that make sure people do not abuse the organizations that employ them.
I'm going to ask you this lastly before I come to these other two gentlemen over here. Between 1999 and today, we have had initiatives supposedly aimed at fighting off extreme poverty as we have come to know it today. However, the names would always change. At one time, it has to be alleviation. At another time, it has to be eradication. Some persons have said that is a conflict that's not sustainable. It shouldn't even be there in the first instance. Then there's also the argument that eradication of poverty is not realistic. You can only, at best, alleviate poverty. How do we establish a clear-cut distinction between both eradication, alleviation?
Okay, an older boy in my school used to say when we were back in school, he say, if you want to make a grade 2, prepare like you're preparing to make a grade 1.
Okay.
Okay, and if you want to make a grade 1, prepare like you want to make an aggregate 6. You know, prepare for the very best, so that if you do not make the very best, you make something good enough. So if you prepare for eradication, then you might end up with alleviation. You have to prepare, you know, like, yes, it's possible to actually reduce it to a minimum. What do countries do? Countries have buffer programs. You know, buffer program to take care of the down and the downtrodden and the weak, the poor, the very, and they do so in complement of other policies and programs to make sure they don't remain there perpetually. That at some point they are able to get out of that, move out of that poverty level. It's a mental thing. If I give you, there's this program in the United States called Section 8. Okay, Section 8 is a program whereby poor people are given loans, soft loans, an opportunity to buy properties. Okay. And when you buy a property, you have to pay taxes on those properties. And to be able to pay taxes on the properties, you need to have a job. So it makes them become responsible. He was poor, he didn't have a property of his own. But now you have increased his self-esteem. Now he has a property of his own. And his friends now see that he owns that property, and he has told his friends, this is my property, this is my home. He is proud of it. But to keep that pride, he needs to work. So these are all programs, these are things you have to do. You have to do things to change the mindset of people, to make them see wrong for what wrong is, and make them see right for what right is.
Okay, let me come to Destiny now. Okay. Prof, you want to ask something?
Yeah, there's this MSME question that you had asked. For MSME, the only way to actually alleviate poverty in this country is to encourage small and medium scale manufacturers.
Okay.
Because right now, the big multinationals that have left this country because of the very, very harsh environment we are likely not going to return. So now is to encourage Nigerians to become more productive. And for you to be able to do this, government must bring in assistance. Not the insincere type that they are doing. We're eradicating or alleviating. Of course, okay, the vice president of the country has this, the ease of business. They've introduced that into this to this group of persons to be able to come up. But however, we are talking about the ease of business. I heard recently, for instance, that in NAFDAC now, they are increasing the rate for registration, the cost of registering products and all that. And so, for a man who wants to go start up a business, where is he going to get money? Of course, if you want to register a cosmetic product now, you need to pay about 70-something thousand naira to NAFDAC for registration. Ordinary water is about 50-something thousand naira for you to register your business for NAFDAC to be able to give you a number. So for somebody who is not working at all but wants to at least make a living by starting up a little business. Where is he going to get all?
Establishing a water plant is not a small business, is it?
It can be. Let me tell you, there's nothing much in that place. It's setting up a filtration system, especially like in our Benin here, Benin water that is very, very good and all that. Setting up a small filtration system, and then you put a UV to sterilize it, and you can go buy 1 carton or bottles from somewhere and fill in, and you start from there.
If I may add, you can establish with less than the 70-something thousand that they
are asking you to pay for registration. Then you are talking about ease of business. Then the last time I went to Lagos, coming from Lagos to get to Benin, I passed over 100 checkpoints on the road. Police, customs, this, that.
And you felt safe knowing that there was security on the road?
Yes, and they are not controlling. Which security? In midst of all these people, you have not heard of somebody who came in from abroad and there was even killed on the road by customs and all that? You can't be, the sense of security is when you don't see security agents. Everywhere is calm. I have always said the best way to control all of this is to go into the people and then check criminals. Not by coming to the road and terrorizing people by carrying guns and all that. So for a farmer, for instance, to transport goods from Lagos and he coming to Benin, of course, the first trip we made will be discouraged because of the amount he would have parted with on the road. That's one. He mentioned something just now. We used to have what we call extension workers. People who will go into farms to train you on the latest methods of planting and then the seedlings that are now being used. Do we still have all of that? We used to have in those days under PWD road makers who will control roads so that goods can leave, or farm produce can leave the farms back down to the market. If you go to many of our farm roads now, they are not accessible. So the problem is that we have to then, number one, to cure half of those who are poor in this country, give Nigerians electricity. People are waiting. If you can get 15 hours electricity in this country, you find that if we were 20% of rich people before, we jump to 80%. Think of the number of persons that are hairdressers. Think of those vulcanizers. We don't used to use diesel and petrol before to pump our tires and all that. But these days, it's what you use to power your engine to be able to pump tires. But if you have electricity, you will find that a number of persons will now be engaged. And many of these industries are even doing well. Are they making profit from using diesel generators? How are they going to make profit? So if you have lights, and which will also make our environment safe for us because of pollution, you see the intense heat that is now in the environment. You know the cause of all of this. The sun has not changed and all that, but then the ozone layer is depleted because of what we are putting in the environment. And of course, we are cutting down more trees, and we are not increasing all of this. This is even an environment where all these things are supposed to be. And so, I just think that government is not sincere. We know the problem.
Let's talk about government a bit now. There's this clip where Vice President Yemi Osinbajo is talking about efforts being made by government to ensure that poverty is alleviated. But just 2 days ago now, the presidency says it is preparing a bill to send to the National Assembly, which they hope that it will be able to take care of the issue of poverty in Nigeria. But let's listen to the VP and see what he says about efforts being made by government to ensure that poverty is cut to its barest.
The nature of our economy is one where we cannot afford what is traditionally called the trickle-down approach, which is where we're just working on industry and working on business and hoping that if we create enough industry and create enough business, people will be employed. That way, yes, people will be employed, but it will be too slow because we have a large, very large population of extremely poor people, very large. So we must address the questions of the bottom of the pyramid at the same time as we are addressing the questions of industry and all of that to create jobs. And so one of the critical things that we're doing is looking at how to resource the bottom of the pyramid, how to give credit to the bottom of the pyramid so that they can earn, so that those people at the bottom of the pyramid can do their business, which is all usually informal trading. They can continue to do their business, they can do their work, and they can also make their own contributions. So with the what is called the trader money scheme or the market money, depending on which one it is, this is a credit scheme that is being given to almost 2 million traders, petty traders. We believe that by giving them money directly, and these are people who are already in some trade or the other, they're able to improve their inventory, and they're able to do more of their trade and get out of poverty. Because the very first thing is to get people out of the desperate situation of poverty. And so we have to almost invert the process such that the very poorest, the lowest, also have resources, which is usually open.
Destin, obviously you heard the Vice President talking about poverty, the bottom of the pyramid.
Of course.
He's talking about 2 million people to whom microcredits has to be made available.
Of course.
Does that change the narrative for the better?
Yes, it's good if we look at it from a political angle. The truth is, big problems require big solutions.
Okay.
90 million Nigerians are poor. The population of this country is 193 million at current estimate. Half of the population is below the poverty line. That's a big problem. You don't tackle a big problem using small solutions. I'll give you an example. Volkswagen is one company in Germany. It employs over 400,000 people. Dangote PLC is a conglomerate of companies. It's building a refinery that will start operating next year. 600,000 barrels. Nigeria as a country has 4 refineries, 2 moribund, producing a combined capacity of 400,000 barrels. If one corporation, Dangote PLC, can build 600,000 barrels capacity of refineries, it tells you the power of institutions. Winners Chapel, the church, has just built the largest estate in Africa of 25,000
housing units.
Right. One church, because it's an institution. If you give 25,000 people 1 million to build houses, and you give one large institution 25 million to build, institutional power is a place where companies use crane to build skyscrapers. Now, I understand the sentiment. A lot of Nigerians are poor, below poverty line, so you need to solve
so every 1,000, every 5,000 will make sense in that circumstance.
Will make sense in that circumstance. But the effort of the government should be solving it from the big angle, the institutional angle. Why are they poor in the first place? They are poor because we don't have companies in this country that are capable of employing people and taking them out of poverty. Why don't we have companies in this country? Because we do not have infrastructures, we don't have a credible system, we don't have a banking system that is ready to give loans to big people. So what we need is institutional development. The government must be critical. One, we must develop our ports to attract people. There is a lot of billions that flow into this country through the port system. It must be developed. Dubai is very popular because of its port system. Two, we must deliberately cut investors. Only 10 companies come into this country. 10 companies. From you must cut them. You must flirt with them. All the countries that you see that are developed today, they flirted with these superpowers. Why? Facebook is worth $560 billion. The total worth of our stock exchange, the Nigerian stock exchange, is about $200 and something billion. One American company is worth more than the Nigerian stock exchange. The power of institutions. So what government should be trying to do to solve 90 million poverty problem, you need to build institutions. The police built, the banking sector consolidated. There should be people who think for Nigeria, who sit down and map Nigeria into a matrix and begin to look at sectors that we need to drive. Nigeria has one of the purest forms of steel in the world, hematite. Nigeria has enough steel to run this country for 50 years. We are ignoring it. Steel generates more money than crude oil. Therefore, the government should sit down, set up, build the steel company, make it work, do whatever to make it work. It still doesn't. Look at it. I heard Suzuki are building a plant in Ghana. Volkswagen, going to Ghana. Mercedes-Benz went to South Africa. They came to Nigeria first. They came to do some. We have a population, but the population is poor. They came to analyze whether they should build a plant in Nigeria. You know what they found out? They noticed that South Africa, although a small country with 40 million people then, buys 625 brand new Mercedes-Benz every year. Nigeria, with 190 million people, only bought 120,000 Mercedes-Benz. South Africa bought 4 times more than Nigeria. If you were a businessman, you want to set up a plant like that, where will you set it up?
It's obvious.
It's obvious. South Africa. South Africa has 24 hours power as at that time. But South Africa's average income is $12,000 per year. Nigeria's average income is roughly $2,500. So what government should be doing is, we should be building those things. Look at the things that attract investors. 1, your road infrastructure should be great. 2, your legal system should be sound. Why? A company has an issue, he wants to go into litigation, and then the thing lasts 7 years. Nobody will come to your country when they are watching the news and they are noticing that there are certain cases that are in court that last forever.
I'm just going to give these 2 gentlemen a minute each to add to what they said.
There's something I need to say here. China worked with policy of isolation. He has said something now. You find that Nigerian market is very big, but these companies are not coming into Nigeria and setting up industries around the West African coast
and plants.
And the target is Nigerian economy. And this government is not doing anything. China worked with policy of isolation and say, okay, we close our borders. Nothing is going to come from outside. If you need to trade with Nigeria, come into Nigeria to build, to start your business.
They call them tariff factories.
So, let me tell you, before we go on that trajectory, China failed when they had that policy.
Okay.
It was when they opened up their economy to the rest of the world that it began to succeed.
I'm talking about import. Import.
Yeah, yes, imports.
Import. You know, we're here. Ordinary toothpick is imported.
Right.
Ordinary soap is imported. Another handkerchief is imported. China closed their borders to that and said, if you want to sell things like that in our country, come into the country. So they didn't close it to investors and all that. That is what we are saying. You shouldn't just open your borders to anything. You must select. Nobody is controlling anything now. And so Nigerians are just consuming. You know, consumers are not producing anything because it's better to buy from outside.
Gentleman next to you, a minute to lend his voice as we wrap up this conversation about extreme poverty.
Okay. The aspect I want to speak to right now is in technology.
Okay.
Technological exposure. We are not sufficiently exposed to technology. For example, the American farmer. There are American farmers who are 60 and 70 years old. They have never seen a cutlass, machete in their lives. They have never seen a hoe in their life. Because long time ago, over 50, 60 years ago, they did away with all of that.
Right.
They introduced technology. Here we are refusing to embrace technology. There are some motorized mini equipments for plowing and harrowing and harvesting and all of that. If we spend all our time watching African magic,
which is not wrong anyway, but we have to balance our priorities. That's the point.
When we are doing that, okay, and then the National Orientation Agency is not doing anything to patronize such stations by bringing in programs to expose us to these technologies, these basic technologies that we can embrace. We are not going to move anywhere because we are going to be stuck with our old mindset of doing things the obsolete way.
Incidentally, all 3 of you have talked brilliantly on this issue of dealing with extreme poverty in Nigeria. We hope going forward, government in particular, then in collaboration with other stakeholders, will do the needful and be able to raise as many people as possible in this country out of poverty. I've been talking with Destiny Owobu, statistician, Professor Julius Asele, Chairman, ASU, UNIMED chapter, and Fred Uyigwe, economic expert. All 3 gentlemen, thank you for coming on the program. We appreciate your inputs on this discussion this morning. We'll take a quick break at this point. I'm back in a few minutes to wrap it up on the program. Do stay with me.